Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are
No.
FAIRtax Guys. And you are covered up by your FAIRtax banner, and I'm back in front of my Alaska glacier.
I love the Alaska glacier. Doesn't look like it's moved very much in the last little bit, though.
Oh, it really hasn't. Well, we'll be going back to Alaska shortly, but this time it's going to be on a cruise.
Yeah.
Last summer we went up to ride the train between Fairbanks and Anchorage, and saw a lot of the interior of the state. And our friends there took us up to this national park there where the glacier is. This time we're going on a cruise with some friends from church, so we won't be going inland much, but we'll see how that works here.
Good. Yeah, are there any whales up in that neck of the woods?
There's supposed to be quite a few of them. They do have some whale watching excursions that you can go on, but which has absolutely nothing to do with the FAIRtax. But we're just.
But here's the thing. Here's the correlation. If you decided to help the FAIRtax organization execute and implement the FAIRtax across the nation, you would have more income, more money in your pocket to go on a trip to Alaska, and maybe with Bob.
Oh, well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But you know what?
Think about the money that you would save and the time and the trouble and the mental anguish of dealing with the Internal Revenue Service would all be gone.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the beauties of the FAIRtax, that it lets people save and invest totally tax-free. You get to bring home your entire paycheck, so the IRS doesn't grab a big chunk of it before you get it. You can set your savings aside. Of course, you feed your family before you feed the government, because the prebate gives you back all the taxes you pay on your basic necessities. So it makes life easier in every regard, including saving to take an Alaska cruise, or to buy a house, or to buy a car, whatever you need to save for, and save for your retirement, save for your education, anything. FAIRtax helps all of that. But
absolutely,
let's see what the Congress critters are up to now, trying to mess up the tax code. And so far, nobody has taken you up on your offer to send us their favorite congress.gov thing. So I'm going to continue to dig them out here for a little while. But again, if you got a particular one that you're looking at congress.gov that you think ought to be highlighted here on FAIRtax Power Radio, just send it to us at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com, and we'll check that out. But for this time around, first on the list is H.R. 2902. This is to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to, now get this does a lot. Repeal the alcohol fuels credit, repeal the biodiesel's fuel credit, repeal the sustainable aviation fuel credit, the clean fuel production credit, the alcohol fuel, biodiesel, and alternative fuel mixtures credit, and your favorite phrase, other related purposes. So again, we highlight stuff like this to demonstrate just how fluid and unstable, I guess is the better word, that the tax code is. Because in order to repeal all these credits, they had to have been implemented a while back. Alcohol fuels credit, biodiesel's fuels credit, sustainable aviation fuels credit, clean fuel production credit, the alcohol, fuel, biodiesel, and alternative fuel mixtures credit, and other related purposes is all in the tax code. And I can almost see a little bit of political agenda pushing in this one. I see one side of the aisle is pushing all these alternative fuels, and the other side of the aisle, just because the first side likes it, the second side doesn't like it, and they say, well, if you're going to get all these things in, we're going to repeal them when we take power back. And that is just not a good tax system. That is so unstable that you never know from one year to the next what credits are going to be available, what deductions are going to be available. It's just a whole lot easier if you pay your federal taxes at the cash register when you buy things, and don't have all of these credits and deductions and loopholes and exemptions that are constantly shifting around at the behests of lobbyists in 99.74% of the cases. But this is why we need the FAIRtax.
Absolutely, one of the best reasons why, and for other purposes, is a very broad addition to those bills that are introduced as such. This one said related, had the word related in there.
Yeah, other related purposes. They messed with your favorite phrase a little bit.
Well, I mean, but they narrowed it down to so they have to stay in the rails on the category that we're talking about there. But again, how asinine is this that we're dealing with it? With the key part of that comment of mine on the first syllable of that word, asinine. And so, we have to really be careful as we move forward. There's a great video that's on the FAIRtax Facebook page that everybody needs to go watch. It's the general speeches that are going on in C-SPAN, and the guys back in the lab back here at the FAIRtax organization put together a wonderful piece of video that shows all of the co-sponsors of the bill. HR 25, and there it is. It's in all its glory, all the people that are behind it. The ball is rolling, and I think what we do with Congress.gov goes a long way in helping people understand just how convoluted our tax code is, and what a great day in America it will be when it is, as you like to say, pulled out by the roots. And the Internal Revenue
and tossed on the scrap heap of history. There you go. Now you got both of my cliches in the same sentence there. But we got to get on here so I don't get fussed at for taking up too much time again.
Right.
Here we go. Let's go on. The next one today is HR 25. Check that 2859 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish new community benefit standards for tax-exempt hospital organizations and for other purposes. There's no text in that. I have no clue beyond what that description is, what this bill does, but apparently the Internal Revenue Code has community benefit standards for tax-exempt hospitals, and Representative Spartz, S-P-A-R-T-Z, from Indiana wants to change that.
Righto. Boy, I'm telling you, it's just absolutely it's incredible what gets piled up in the tax code through these introductions. Some of them don't make it. But if they get in there through the tax code, it's just one more line, one more segment, one more piece of confusing tax code rule that gets gobbled up by. And who knows, if you miss it, then you've either lost a potential benefit, or you've gotten to a point where you end up with no information about it, and you miss it on your tax return, and it was something you could have used. You're spending all your time worrying about it. And like we say, hey, let's pay our taxes at the cash register. That's what we need.
Absolutely. Let's get on down the road here a little bit. Next one today is HR 2849 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish a credit for the domestic production of, wait for it, rare earth magnets and for other purposes. I think we've seen this one before, something similar to it.
I remember I used to listen to a group called Rare Earth back in the 70s.
Oh, okay. Did you ever play them on the radio there?
Yeah, sure did.
Okay, well, if HR 2849 gets through, there will be a credit for the domestic production of rare earth magnets and for other purposes. And let me scoot down to the last one I've picked out for today. And this one is actually going in the Hall of Shame because its companion House bill is already in the Hall of Shame. And if, might as well just put both of them in there at one time. This is S1272 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for examination and disclosure with respect to presidential income tax returns, to amend the Ethics in Government Act of 1978 to require the disclosure of certain tax returns by presidents and certain candidates for the office of president and for other purposes. In other words, this bill wants to throw out the confidentiality that we're all supposed to enjoy when we send our most intimate personal data to the IRS on our tax returns.
They get the Internal Revenue Service gets a lot of information about us in that one particular package that we send off on an annual basis.
I mean, we have heard before that the IRS knows so much about you and so much about your financial dealings and transactions. There has actually been proposed in the past the idea that once the IRS gets all these new supercomputers that they are supposed to be getting, that they will just calculate everybody's tax return for them and basically just send them a bill. We're going to simplify your tax returns. We're going to do it for you. Now, how rotten is that idea?
Well, I've heard it called a pre-audit, you know, and I mean, that's insane. It's absolutely insane. And so they're basically just going to say, well, we're going to take your money and,
We're going to prepare your tax return for it, look it over, which means you'll have to spend as much time verifying the IRS figures as you will be coming up with your own figures if you're doing it yourself. Can you imagine sending a thing back to the IRS that says, nope, you're wrong? And then they'll say, all right, the burden of proof is on you to prove that we're wrong. It's a rotten system, folks. We need to replace it all with the fair tax. Replace all of this nonsense with a simple, progressive retail consumption tax that you pay anonymously at the cash register when you buy things. No tax returns, no records to keep, no exemptions, no loopholes, no deductions. All that junk goes by the way, along with the IRS. It all goes away with the fair tax, and we need to get this going.
HR 25. Folks, there's a telephone number for the Congress switchboard that's readily available online, and you can call the number to the Capitol, up there in Washington, D.C., where they are and where they hang out and come up with all these cockamamie things to do to us. You call your representative and ask them if they're a co-sponsor. And if they're not, make sure that you have them on record as to why not. Why are you not a co-sponsor of this bill? H.R. 25 is going to be debated on the floor of the House of Representatives sometime here in the near future, or after summer, or somewhere. It's been promised.
I've heard around Labor Day, but then that's still an inexact time frame, so we don't know for sure.
We know how those calendars can get filled up with things up there in Washington. So please do that. Take a moment, write down the number. I'll have it for you here in a minute. That we'll let you call your representative. If they're not a co-sponsor, then you need to find out why and have them go on record.
We've got to make sure that they don't renege on the promise of giving it a vote. I mean, that's still a possibility. So you need to lean on your representatives to make sure that they follow through on their promise that we're going to bring this thing up for a vote, up or down, in this 118th Congress.
Because it could be that they just sort of we're so far removed from the promise from McCarthy to attain his speakership. One of the things that was done that was promised was a vote on the floor, a debate and vote on the floor of H.R. 25, which is the FAIRtax Act.
Yeah, well, Steve Hayes has been mentioning in all of the chairman's reports that have been published recently that we're going to have this vote, and we, the people, have the chance to make our elected representatives, state their position. Are you for the income tax? Are you for and the IRS and the withholding and all audits and all the junk that comes with it? Or are you for replacing that with the fair tax? Do you want the income tax or the fair tax? And they're going to have to decide. And those who say, I think I'd rather keep the IRS as a part of your life and keep letting the government grab a big chunk of your paycheck before you get it and making you live under 70,000 pages of incomprehensible tax code is a great idea. They're going to have to explain that, and they can't come out with the real reason. The real reason is that they enjoy using the income tax code to control people and to, extract great amounts of money from lobbyists looking to buy favorable. Oh man, I'm really going to get fussed at this time. We went way long on this. Sorry, guys.
I'm going to go ahead and give the Capitol switchboard number.
Okay, go ahead.
It's readily available on your favorite search engine. You just type in Capitol switchboard. The number is 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Make that call today. Somebody's waiting for your call.
Operators are standing by, right? All right, let's get on here with what we were going to go with. Now, you recently sent me a couple of more links of stuff. Now, we've been talking for the past couple of weeks on FAIRtax Power Radio about the FAIRtax basics and how it all is going to work. But we're switching back for this week anyway, and probably next week as well, to why we need to get rid of the current income tax system and replace it with a fair tax. And the biggest reason is that the IRS is just such, I mean, it's been called a criminal organization. And I'm almost in complete agreement with that thing. But again, they have been given a massive increase in their budget. And what they're going to do with it, this is a town hall article that was published a few weeks ago on April 8th. IRS plans to hire 30,000 more agents to harass hardworking Americans. Now, of course, that headline is a bit of, the town hall is a conservative leaning site.
Right.
So you're going to get a little bit of their political opinion that, hey, the IRS is going to harass the snot out of a bunch of Americans, which is probably true. Some people could look at that and think that that's a little bit of agenda pushing. But hey, if you're going to hire 30,000 more agents to harass people, that's a rotten system. We need to get rid of it.
Right. Even if you don't use the word harass, and you might think, well, they've been short-staffed and they've lost people through the pandemic from actually working, and folks, everybody's been working from home. Well, the Internal Revenue Service, and hat tip to Sarah Arnold for writing this article. The Internal Revenue Service plans to hire at least 30,000 additional agents over the next 2 years, spending about $80 billion on new technology that the Biden administration will fund. So they're moving from DOS 1.0 to probably around XP, and then they'll leapfrog into Windows 8 and then 8.2. And then they'll go on to 11 at some point. Well, according to the 148-page strategic operating plan, the federal agency will allocate roughly $8.64 billion toward the fiscal years 2023, that's the one that we're in, and 2024. And the plan also states that 8,782 of the newly recruited employees will be designated as enforcement staff during that time. As a result, by the end of 2024, the Internal Revenue Service will have grown its workforce to nearly 100,000 employees. That's a lot of people. 100.
Yeah, and we've got to go back to the whole reason that they are saying they need to do this. They say we need all this extra manpower and we need all these new supercomputers so we can catch the tax cheats. Because the tax evasion is costing the government over $1 trillion. They finally admitted it's $1 trillion a year problem and growing. So we're going to throw all these new agents at you and try to catch all these tax cheats. Unfortunately, the tax cheats don't identify themselves as such, so they're going to have to subject all taxpayers to this intense increased scrutiny to find the cheat. Why don't you just get a system that is harder to evade? You remember you would be
paying your tax when you buy something at the register, like the consumption tax known as the FAIRtax.
Yes, I say you remember Jade Wally's study on that thing.
Yeah.
He says the FAIRtax would reduce evasion by about 95%.
95%.
And all of these new agents and all of these new laws and all of this new technology isn't going to come close to putting that kind of a dent in the evasion problem. So they're giving us a bogus reason for hiring all these guys to begin with and say we're going to, collect all these billions of dollars. Why don't you just put in a system that can't be evaded? Well, it can be evaded. I mean, wherever there's a tax, there's a way around it. But when you're talking about the difference between the income tax and the FAIRtax, the evasion rates under there, the FAIRtax's evasion rate is about 95% less than what you get with the income tax. Get rid of the rotten system here, folks.
I tell you, and this is what, because you've been at it a long time, the Americans for Fair Taxation, that's the operating group of the FAIRtax organization, and have been working at this for a long time, since 1999 when it was first introduced, and it keeps getting shoved back in committee and reintroduced and shoved back in committee. Why? Well, because it upsets the status quo in Washington. And we the people, you and I and everybody out there that's watching and is a part of the volunteer group and people that are just casually kind of looking around and going, man, the whole concept of the income tax, we've lived with it all of our lives. Well, I remember my father sitting down at his desk once a year and instead of coming outside and playing with his poor old son, he was, sitting there figuring up his taxes. And he was not an accountant, but he was a money type oriented to money, so he had a pretty good idea. But back in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't near as convoluted as it is now. And so when we think about it, we don't know any other way, but there is, and there actually was another way to handle all of this. Prior to the institution of the 16th Amendment and the bringing in the income tax the last time it was brought in. So this whole thing about extra agents and all, the chances of you getting a phone call or a letter, I think you don't know that you get a phone call, but you get a letter saying we're going to audit you. And there's things that you can look for to keep from, rising up to the surface of scrutiny.
We may get into this a bit next week. The actual chances of being audited are still pretty small. But the hassle and the aggravation and the pain that an audit causes you, if you're one of the unfortunate few that do get selected for that, that is very real. And there's a very much better system to do that. It's called a FAIRtax. We need to get rid of the IRS and do that. We got about 6 minutes left here in the program. We need to pivot over to something that was just as of the day we're recording this, which is a Friday, April 28th. This was on the Newsmax today. It just popped up. IRS, but we've mentioned this before, IRS to hire armed agents. We have a tax code that has to be enforced at gunpoint. Think about that, folks. We have to have a tax code that is enforced at gunpoint.
Well, it's not going to.
There's got to be a better way to do this.
Well, it's not going to happen to the average person until it does. And so we have to take these things, and everybody says, oh, conspiracy theory, that's not going to be, that's ridiculous, that's not going to happen. Everybody's going to have an opinion, and we're a politically polarized society right now. So it's a challenge to have substantive conversations with folks unless they're on your side. And so the Internal Revenue Service, according to this article in Newsmax today by Theodore Bunker, says the IRS is hiring armed special agents to work in all 50 states as part of the agency's larger hiring push. There's a job posting listed by the Criminal Investigation section of the IRS. That's the agency's law enforcement branch. The position would involve investigating financial crimes and potential violations of the IRS code and requires that applicants be a U.S. citizen, qualified from special experience or education, at least 25 years of age at the time of training, when the training would be complete, and, quote, legally allowed to carry a firearm.
Major duties listed: be willing and able to participate in arrests, execution of search warrants, and other dangerous assignments. So if you've got a tax code that requires armed agents to enforce it because people are criminally evading it and doing things that they shouldn't do, that tells you we got a rotten tax code that needs to go away in favor of a nice, easy, simple consumption tax you pay at the cash register when you buy things. How many times do we have to say this before it's going to sink in?
Well, and there's an article that was published today also that says the new Chief Werfel says the IRS won't hire armed auditors. Within the same day that this particular article was posted on Newsmax, so IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel said yesterday that the agency will not hire any armed auditors with $80 billion in new funding, and attempted to dispel Republican assertions. See what I told you about the polarity? Everything's political. The IRS plans to build an army of 87,000 armed agents. And he was sworn in as a tax chief, Werfel was, on April 4th, acknowledged a House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee hearing that the IRS Criminal Investigations Division would hire additional staff authorized to carry firearms, but said that this division does not conduct audits. So Werfel is in there, new guy, hadn't even been there 30 days yet, is now saying, we're not going to have the enforcement, that particular division, criminal investigations, will not be conducting audits. So nobody's going to come in and do an audit and have a Glock.
Yeah, so I guess the guy that comes into your small business and demands to see all of your records for the past 13 years will not be carrying a firearm. But he's still got enough clout to make your life really miserable if he wants to.
Yeah. And so I go back to the shoebox, and I go back to what we just talked about, and the fact that we spend so much time on a weekly basis talking about the Internal Revenue Service. Imagine life without them. Imagine life without that. Imagine April 15th, just a few weeks ago. Imagine what that would be like if you didn't have that burden on you to collect, and if you didn't have somebody to help you, what it would be like to not have to do that. The things a small businessman, a one man band out there, he's probably got his wife or somebody helping him out to keep up with everything. Imagine what that would do for your time. Your creative mind would just be, you could explode in innovation and creativity. And now I think that's the biggest thing for me about this.
Well, I think we have repeatedly made the case over and over quite well, if you ask me, that we need to get rid of the entire income tax system and the IRS that goes along with it. And if we could just get people to go to fairtax.org, sign up for the 1040 Club. That's, of course, named after the 1040 individual return IRS income tax form. But if people are willing to, I'll use the word invest, $10.40 a month. I mean, that's a couple of Starbucks, and that's it. It's not a great deal of money. If you can get just that little bit from a lot of folks, then Americans for Fair Taxation would have the financial wherewithal to do some more economic studies, to actually hopefully do some more advertising, get people aware of the fair tax. I mean, we've been doing this FAIRtax Power Radio program for 7 or 8 years now. Our viewership numbers aren't what we'd like to see, but it is what it is. But if you could buy commercials on cable news shows of all political persuasions, and just let people know that there is an alternative to the Internal Revenue Service, I think folks would love to have that alternative. And eventually, once they understand it, they demand it.
Exactly. And that's what we talk about. And it's a positive thing. I'm excited about the future of the fair tax, especially this year with HR 25 bubbling out of committee and onto the floor of the House of Representatives later this year. And I do believe that it's going to take all of us, those of you who are listening, please share the programs and let people know we're out here. And by golly, get involved in the 1040 program that Bob just spoke about at fairtax.org. That's
right.
One thing that you can do that will help greatly in helping us promote what's going on, and make comments on the various Facebook pages of the state groups, because there are a lot out there. Get people active in your neighborhood and let them know, hey, this is something that's really important. It takes everybody that's watching and listening to do that, and we thank you for that.
Well, we've got some more IRS goodies to dig into next week, and we're going to have to do it next week because we are slap out of time for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Again, thank you so much for watching, listening, and sharing. Again, if you'd like us to feature your little favorite Congress.gov bit, write us at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. But until we meet again, that's going to wrap it up. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
The FAIRtax is a tax replacement plan where we take all the federal income taxes, including corporate, personal, gift, and estate taxes, and replace them with one national consumption tax on new purchases, above the poverty level only. This form of consumption tax comes with no exceptions and is progressive, not regressive. The poor are not paying more, and the rich are not paying less. What makes it progressive is that all Americans are untaxed up to the poverty level via the prebate, much like your standard tax deduction. The taxes are collected by retail businesses at state level, so the system is more accountable. The IRS is done away with, and you have control over your money and what the overall tax rate your household pays. The fair tax is revenue neutral, so the government receives the same amount of money as they do now. And it's fair because you decide what's fair, not them. To learn more, visit fairtax.org and be sure to like us on social media to help educate your friends and spread the word.